So yeah, the AQIRYS Aludra. I'm saying AQIRYS. I don't know for sure if that's actually how you say it. I apologize if that's wrong, but that's how my brain tells me to pronounce it. But either way, I do know that the Aludra is actually a star in the sky, quite a bright one in fact. And that kind of makes sense because this is a very bright keyboard to look at. But whether or not you're into RGB is not the point here. The point is, how's the keyboard itself actually feel to use? And after using it for a little while so far, I gotta say it's actually replaced my previous keyboard as my new daily driver because I really like this thing. I should mention, just to be clear, that I was sent this to take a look at, so, you know, do with that information what you will, but I really do quite like it. But more to the point, I think it's a really good deal, and that's kind of why I was interested in it in the first place, because it's a little bit inexpensive for the type of keyboard it is. You see, anyone that's, you know, been in the market for a mechanical keyboard for any amount of time knows that they're not the cheapest boards to get. They are generally quite high quality, they have a lot of moving parts, and they're expensive. But hot-swappable boards in particular are even more expensive than that, and this being a hot-swappable board with per-key illumination on a detachable cable, which you would be surprised how much that can add to the price sometimes, and all these other features, it made me think that it was going to be quite an expensive board, and it feels very premium, but it's actually only about 150 bucks, and some of you might be saying $150 is a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but for a really good keyboard, it's actually not that much. Especially considering this thing does come fully assembled with pre-looped switches, pre-looped stabilizers, a bunch of extra switches for you to replace if you want, and a bunch of tools in the sort of accessory pack. It is a very fully featured board for the price, and I think that it's actually a really good deal because of how quality it's felt to me so far. It actually feels like it is very sturdy. The keycaps are thick double shots. The frame itself is also this really thick ABS that has like no flex at all. You can't bend it even if you tried, which is pretty cool. And it's even got the sort of sound dampening foam layer at the bottom and stuff to give it a nice like deep sound. It has a really almost crystalline sound to it, which you probably noticed in the intro there. Now by default it does come with the G Pro Gateron 2.0 switches, the Reds, which are a linear switch, which a lot of people I know that play video games a lot prefer linear switches because they are extremely fast. They are very high speed switches. They have a very high response time because there's no bump, no click to wait for. They're just, you press them and they go. They're really fast, and that it definitely shows in this board that that is what a lot of people want. I understand now that I've used this. I've never actually used that many linear switches before, but now that I've used these, well, they're a really high quality switch actually, and I really like the way they feel, and I am probably going to replace the board with something else just to try it because, hey, it's a hot swappable board, so why not, right? But it does also come with 20 of their own make of switches, these ocean blue switches, which are a really nice feeling sort of pre-lubed tactile switch. So think something like a Cherry MX Brown, but they're stiffer. You have to press them harder for them to actuate, and the point at which that tactile bump is a lot sooner in the travel than something like a Brown. So they have a pretty unique feel to them, and I actually really enjoy the way that they feel. But of course, the beauty of a hot swappable board is you can buy whatever switches you want and just throw them in here and they'll work. Since this board supports both 3 and 5 pin switches, it means pretty much any switch purchase that you could possibly make that is recently, I guess modern-ish even, was going to fit in this board and work right out of the box, which is awesome. The software that it comes with is pretty lightweight, which I appreciate. I'm always sort of iffy about software options and things for boards and mice and other peripherals like that. You know, sometimes the software is a bit bloaty and kind of slow and annoying to use. This one is very lightweight, at least. It launches really quick, and you don't even have to keep it open. Once you have gotten the settings that you want, you can just close it and not worry about it, and it'll still work just fine. So I do at least appreciate the fact that it is very unintrusive software. But overall, my real feelings on it are that it's an extremely high-quality feeling board for the price, and you can easily spend $120, $150, sometimes $180 for a bare-bones kit that is just the board. No switches, no keycaps, nothing, just the skeleton. And the fact that this is about $150 for everything all assembled and a nice little kit of accessories to go along with it, that makes me feel like it's sort of an uncommonly good deal for a mechanical keyboard that could probably cost more. Now, this is, of course, the full-sized version of the board, but I should mention that there is a 10 keyless design as well, so if you are more interested in a TKL, they do have an Aludra TKL for that purpose. But I also noticed that despite this being a full-sized board, it's actually a little bit more compact than a general full-sized board usually is, which I actually quite like, because I use a lot of the function keys and the numpad and insert and some other stuff like that because I do a lot of video editing and things, so those extra keys are nice to have, which is why I pretty much always to go with a full-size board and not any like an 80% or a 75% or a 10 keyless or what have you. I tend to really enjoy the full-size form factor because all those extra keys are actually useful to me, which I know is a bit of a niche case, and that's not the same for everyone, but I like full-size boards. And I like the fact that what they've done with the space on this board has actually made it a little slimmer while still being full size and having all the keys. So you've got, for instance, the top and bottom of the board, the frame is smaller in those areas, so it doesn't jut out very far. It makes it more compact feeling, the same as on the left and right, but it's especially prevalent on the top and bottom, where there's usually more of like a bezel, more of the frame visible. There's not much of that here. You'll also notice that there's the spacing in between the main board itself and the numpad, the sort of empty space in between those clusters of keys, is really small. They've managed to make that space about as small as possible while still offering enough space to where your fingers don't get tripped up if you're used to just reaching for the numpad real quick. It's still a good enough space that you're not, mashing multiple keys at once, but it's still a noticeably reduced sort of footprint on your desk. And I think it's kind of cool because you don't see that very often. Most of the time when someone says they want a compact board, they're saying they want a TKL or a 75% or a 65% or something like that. And that's fine. I'm glad those boards exist because all the form factors are cool. But for those of us that want a full-size board, oftentimes we have to have a big plank. That's just kind of how it works. If you want like the full 100, 410 key layout, then you got a big plank on your desk. So I appreciate the fact that they've managed to slim that down a little bit, make it feel more compact without sacrificing the number of keys available. So just for a closer look up of the board itself, to point out a couple of things. The first thing you'll notice if you ever hold one of these is that it's very heavy, which is something that I always look for in a board, because generally speaking in mechanical keyboards, heavy means good build quality, usually is what it means. And in this case, that's definitely what it means. You'll notice this board has like no board flex at all because it's all premium ABS, so it is very thick feeling, and the heaviness is for a reason. You'll also notice that the keycaps have this sort of interesting, cute pictographic style going on, which is something that I enjoy. Of course, you are free to replace these as you wish, but these are high quality, solid double-shot ABS keycaps, so they feel very good to use. Another thing that deserves a close-up is this spacebar focus. This spacebar is a bit of an odd shape, you might notice. It's very large. It's got this lip to it that hangs over the front. And this lip is so that when you press it down, the lip itself hits the frame before the key bottoms out. Which means even if you slam it, like a lot of people do with their space bars, you don't actually bottom out the key, which is an interesting design, and it gives it this sort of deeper sound to it, which I quite like. You'll also, of course, notice, like I showed earlier, this strip along the back and sides here is a fully addressable RGB strip, so if you do want that sort of thing, you can have that, and it does, of course, have lights on the front as well. You can see this sort of bit here also lights up. Another thing to show around the bottom here is that it's got those nice 3-position feet where you've got like flat. You can also just do that for a sort of mild amount of slant to it, or you can, whoops, it's a little stiff. You can put up the full foot if you want a much more extreme sort of grade, depending on how you type and depending on how you sit and the height of your desk and all that. It's just nice to have the multi-positional feet. I like that sort of thing. Also, you've got these really useful channels here. My camera's a little low. And these channels are, of course, for the cord. This has a detachable, very nice braided USB-C cable, and you can guide it through 3 different channels, just depending on what length you're looking at and how far you are away from your tower and all that sort of stuff, which is always nice. And there's your USB-C port right there. But of course, another important question is, what else does it come with for the money? And in fact, this comes with quite a lot, a pretty good assortment of accessories for the price you're paying, in my opinion. So here is what else it comes with. Forget about this a little bit. Along with the board itself. And of course the instructions, naturally. But you've also got things like this, which is a replacement spacebar focus. And if you want to replace the sort of lipped spacebar with a more traditional slimline one, you do have one in here. By the way, the stabilizers this board comes with are really quiet. You don't hear the springiness of them at all, which is interesting. It also comes with something that a lot of people don't think about but is actually really nice to have, which is one of these inline brushes that has the sort of stiff lines of bristles allowing you to get in between your keys and stuff. So yeah, a cleaning brush, always nice to have, and the brush itself also fits this classic form factor keycap puller. Always nice to have one of those too, so why not? And another thing it comes with is this. This is a key switch puller, because this is in fact a hot-swappable board. So if you're looking for the ability to actually change your key switches around easily, then this is for you. So if you've never heard of a hot-swappable board before, normally the way it works is if you have a mechanical board and you want to switch out the key switches underneath the caps, that is going to take some doing, because you have to desolder the old switches and then resolder in the new ones. And that can be quite a process, and not everyone has the skills to do that. But with a hot swappable board like this, all you have to do is use this guy in the right configuration to stick it onto the switch and pull it up, and then plop a new switch in its place, and that's all you have to do. No soldering required, which is really, really nice. And to facilitate you learning about this, they have included these. This is a pack of 20 of their own what are called ocean blue switches, and these I'm interested to try. These are a tactile switch. They're not clicky like an MX blue, but they are tactile, and they are a bit more of a stiffer tactile switch, meaning it takes a little bit more force to actually press them down. And they have a really nice bump to them at the beginning. The bump is a little bit higher than your usual tactile switch, so they feel really good. And by the way, this board does accept both 3 and 5 pin switches, so pretty much any switch on the market right now, if you want to grab, you'll be able to put it in this, and away you go. Another nice little detail I should also mention, by the way, is that this brush isn't just a brush that comes with a puller, but it's also does this, and it's got a very, very fine bristled brush right there, which could be good for getting like stains and stuff off of keycaps directly. And this really, oh, it's barely gonna focus on that, huh? This really, really tiny little sort of detailing tool right here that you could actually stab yourself with if you're not careful, and that's good for getting in the little bitty bits around switches and of course around the caps themselves too, depending on what you're trying to clean out of there. So it is actually a very fully featured little multi-tool that I really appreciate the inclusion of, because you'd be surprised how many really nice boards that are quite expensive don't come with stuff like this. And by the way, if you're not sure how the whole hot swappable thing works, it's pretty simple. Just take off your keycap so you expose the switch. And by the way, this keyboard comes with the 2.0 version of the Gateron G PRO Reds, which are a linear switch, so they're very, very smooth. They press in extremely smooth and feel very good to use, and are also very fast, very highly responsive. But if you wanted to replace them, all you have to do is use this little guy, and you simply get the little prongs here at the very top and the very bottom of the switch. And once you get it in the right place, you can lift it right out like that. So there you go. Now you have a naked switch. And then you simply take your replacement here, make sure to line up the pins on the back with the pins in the socket, and simply press it in straight down with a fair amount of force to make sure it latches into place. And now that it's in, all you gotta do is put your keycap back on, and there you go. You have now replaced a switch. It's really as easy as that. So that's my take on the Aludra. I think it's a really fantastic board that a lot of people who want to get into the mechanical keyboard scene, I could see them being drawn to it because it's just it feels quality, but it's also not going to break the bank, you know what I mean? And a lot of people want hot swappable boards these days. They're getting more popular over the last couple of years. They've really come into their own, and I'm very glad they exist, because I love trying out new switches, and having to solder and desolder everything every single time is really obnoxious. So making a board where I can just shove them in there and they work is fantastic. So obviously I'm a fan of all hot swappable designs, but I'm extra a fan of this when it's a hot swappable design available for a reasonable price at a reasonable quality. The shipping, by the way, was also fine. It came from Europe, and the shipping was quite fast, and it arrived perfectly intact. So if you're worried about shipping, I know some people, they worry about shipping already complete boards, you know, boards with switches in them instead of a bare bones skeleton, because it's easy in shipping at least, for switches to get damaged, and that's always unfortunate, especially if they damage the pins or something, which can even damage the socket itself, which you may have to actually have repaired. But I gotta say, the shipping was fine in this case. It didn't only arrive just fine, it also arrived very well packed with very thick foam and stuff around the board to make sure that nothing was jostling around, and if the package took an impact in the back of a delivery truck or whatever, none of that impact was going to be transferred to the switches. So yeah, I'm a big fan, honestly, and I'm glad to have replaced my old board with something that I really, really like even more, even though I still love my old board and I'm keeping it, obviously. Having a new daily driver that feels this nice to use on a daily basis is a big deal for someone that is on their computer every day. So I will put the link to their website down in the description below this video. They have all sorts of other stuff available, by the way. They don't just make keyboards, they also make mice, all kinds of accessories, and some other stuff like that. So if you want to take a look at this company, they seem to be a bit of an up-and-comer in the scene, then I would recommend maybe trying something of theirs out and see what you feel about the quality, because I think it's a pretty standout thing for the prices they're asking. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.